What's going on, guys? Welcome to Bytera. I'm Ore. The purpose of this YouTube channel is to create a space where people who are genuinely interested in building a real tech career can come to, and where I can also share my insights as someone who has been in the space for the past 8+ years, and I have actively worked with companies based in major parts of the world, basically. The core content area for this YouTube channel will be focused around things like AI walkthroughs. We'll do things around cloud and DevOps concepts. We'll also discuss overall tech productivity hacks that we can kind of pick on. And finally, we would be having deep dives and deep conversations around career concepts, career principles, and insights of that I would love to share with my wider audience on the experiences and things that I've learned while being in the trenches and working as a tech contractor for the past 8+ years. So if you know somebody or if you're interested in this content, welcome. Please subscribe and share as much as you see fit. Thanks, guys, and let's jump right in. Rule 1, lead with value, not identity. One thing I think is very important that you as a contractor, a tech contractor, or someone who's just coming into the industry, that you need to realize is no one really cares about you. And I do not say this to be harsh, but I say this based on the fact that companies focus mostly on outcomes, right? And if you look at things, you as an individual, to a lot of them, you come off as a number on a data sheet, right? So in order to give yourself the best opportunities and to make sure that you are recognized and people become genuinely interested in you, you have to lead with value. What does that basically mean? Leading with value just basically means being able to obsess and focus on how you can become a valuable asset within the organization, right? And I know that most people will be pretty much hear this within every major contracting career tech talk, basically, but it cannot be stressed enough. The reason why is because when someone needs you, they become more interested in who you are. So my advice, get into the system, understand it, close your tech debt as much as and as quickly as possible, and figure out how you can add value. The moment you obsess about the company's pain points, they begin to get interested in you and your background and your identity and the kind of person you are. So just as a quick recap, start with your value first and then follow up with your identity. Rule 2, be authentic, not aggressive. So there's a clear difference between being authentically who you are, even though that person is a bit boisterous, right? You can be yourself and display who you are, especially if you have shown and demonstrated value. It's a lot easier to bring out that confidence in you, right? However, there is always that natural thing that happens whereby there is some sort of conflict or whatever the case may be. The key thing is being confident but not aggressive, being confident but not combative, right? You can push back on certain things, the architectural design, something your tech lead said, but learning to understand the hidden emotional signals and reading the room is just as important as making your point being passed across, right? So the important thing is making sure that as much as you are trying to lay down and you have a valid point, you also get an understanding and know how you deliver that point, basically. And in delivering that point, your authenticity shows, right? Because you get what you want without necessarily having to fight everybody over it. And the more you begin to do that, you begin to establish trust. And once you begin to establish trust, the rest starts to fall into play, basically. So just as a key recap, be authentic and not aggressive. Rule 3, speak up or get left behind. So especially if you work in the remote space or you work in contracting, there is a necessity for you to constantly keep evaluating and reevaluating. And as much as it is the responsibility of the companies to point you in the right direction, it's also your responsibility to identify things that you feel like are not working in the optimal way and take ownership for them, speak up, and ensure that there's a level of visibility in the work that you do. The reason why is because in my experience, and I had to learn this the hard way, you may have the technical knowledge, you may even have the business mindset, right? But if no one knows what you are doing, there is no way you are able to get new opportunities, and there is no way people can recognize and say, oh, this was the one that you worked on, basically. So speaking up goes a long way in creating visibility for yourself, and also it goes a long way in ensuring that when it comes down to it, it is stated and it is known that you raised your concerns with regards to this thing. And even if worst case scenario you get fired, it happens with your integrity intact. And the reality is, one thing I've come to realize is that in situations where you do keep quiet, if the foundation is broken within the system, eventually you would end up losing that job. So it is better to do that and learn those signs and walk away early after you have spoken up than to keep quiet and begin to resent the system. So, like I always say, it is much better to deliver information, half information on time, than it is to deliver complete information when it's too late. So my point is, you need to learn to speak up and be vocal with regards to what is going on and with regards to things that you notice. So just a quick recap: you speak up or you get left behind. And one key fear that I also know people tend to have with regards to speaking up, especially when it's within spaces of superiors, is what if what I say doesn't make any sense? What if what I say is quote and unquote stupid? But the way I see it is, and so what, right? It is better to ask and get the information or get shunned, whereby you begin to now understand that this is how the system of the organization works, and it gives you an opportunity to plan your exit strategy from that moment, right? So you speaking up has way more upsides than it does have downsides. Rule 4, loyalty is earned both ways. One thing that I had to learn during the course of my career was the fact that companies are only loyal to people who are indispensable, right? At the end of the day, if you become someone who you are not useful, you do not bring value, or you just more or less stay within the confines of your job role, to them you become dead weight. And when the time comes for things to happen and budgets to get cut, you would most likely be one of the first people to be let go. And that is usually more so if you are a contractor. So value is the key word. Value is the most important watchword that you should be thinking about. Now, does that mean that you need to stress yourself, or you shouldn't have boundaries? Absolutely not. But you need to be strategic in terms of the kind of work you do, when you do the work, and the kind of work you take on. Starting in the system, in order to reduce your technical depth and to have an understanding of how things work, you should be willing to take in more work. But as you establish trust and you establish a track record of consistency, then you can begin to lay down those boundaries, right? So for me, what is most important is that you focus and understand that companies are only loyal to people who bring value to them. And the advantage of that is, it may seem scary and it may seem like it's not nice, but the truth is, the moment you understand that, you can now begin to build your own value bank, and it gives you more leverage, because the moment you say you want to leave, the company is willing to renegotiate and have conversations with you around your current status and your happiness, and they're more interested and incentivized to make you stay. So I would say again, loyalty goes both ways. You have to remember that a company is only as loyal as the value that you bring to them. So quick recap of what we've covered so far. 1, be authentic. 2, lead with value. 3, do not remember that loyalty goes both ways. And 4, speak up or get left behind. So these things are key points that if you begin to introduce them and have a deep understanding of these things, it really changes your outlook on your role and your place within the system or within an organization, either as a contractor or as a full-time employee. So moving on, we'll be covering the remaining points, and that would really give us and take things to the next level. So let's dive right in. Rule 5, always have an exit strategy. Now, this point is very important because, especially for you as a contractor, the reason why is because for 2 reasons. Not because you are not happy where you are. I feel like even more so when you feel like you're at that point where you are enjoying your job and giving a lot and you are getting the value from the job, you should always be constantly evaluating your place, right? And seeing what's out there in the market and having an understanding of what the market currently looks like, right? That way you are less inclined to be too surprised if anything happened, right? And never be afraid to take calls, take conversations from other recruiters. Always be willing to have the conversation, see what is out there, see what people are talking about. If you are currently happy with where you are, that's perfectly fine. But at the same time, always build an exit plan. And the reason why is because if things suddenly change, your company gets acquired by another company, remember, you are a contractor. Now, this is for the contractors actually. You're a contractor and you are usually the first line item that they look at when they're trying to determine value for money generally. So you should always be thinking about what the next or the main exit plan is if things go wrong. And the earlier you do that, the better. Now, we always have to remember that at the end of the day, your job is based on what you bring to the table. And if you feel like things are not going that way, right? If you feel like things are off, you're having issues with people internally, and you're not getting the satisfaction or the quality pay, obviously within a realistic space, right? You should begin to plan the exit, and not just plan the exit plan, because I feel like that has already been done. You should begin to implement your exit plan. So to recap, always have an exit plan. Rule 6, know your worth and ask for it. So in general, when you are negotiating your contracts, a lot of times there's that tendency for you to want to downplay your skills or downplay who you are, especially when you feel like you're less experienced. But one thing you have to understand is that what you negotiate and the tone you set at the very beginning of your interaction and the negotiation of a contract is how the company will treat you going forward, basically, right? If you are able to negotiate something that they feel is valuable and that you feel is valuable, you are able to put in more effort. You're able to ensure that you do and go above and beyond because you feel like what you're being paid is worth the value you are bringing. So a lot of times there's a psychological aspect of things where you have to constantly weigh and review, one, the market value, two, speaking to other contractors to have an idea what the average pay is for that kind of contract. So you have to always make sure that you know your worth before you step into any meeting room with any recruiter or whatever the case may be. So do your research, make sure that you do proper findings so that you can ask for what you're worth. And there are certain times where, as a result of economic limitations, there is a less requirement or pay for your services. In those type of times, you have to look at things critically and ensure that you have an understanding what is currently being paid for your skills at that point in time. And because if you continue focusing on your growth, you don't remain stagnant. So as things progress and as you get more experience, you find out that your value and your worth becomes more. So like I said, know your worth and ask for it. Rule 7, build trust before you build walls. Now, if you notice, the general tone of this video has been quite heavily slated towards adding value. And the reason why is because the more value that you're able to add within your team, within the organization, and the more visibility you're able to get, right, you are able to then create boundaries that people will respect, and the more people will respect those boundaries. Now, the reason why is because when you create trust and when you create value, people begin to understand that when you add boundaries to those bridges that you have created, it is because you are trying to protect your mental state, trying to protect something. It's not because you are lazy. It's not because you don't want to get the job done. It's not because you are selfish, right? So building the trust that makes people comfortable enough to respect your boundaries is very important so that you don't look like someone who is shirking off work or someone who is avoiding getting things done. Remember, as a tech contractor, you are currently value-oriented, even more so than the full-time employees. So a key thing that I would say is focus on trust building, creating genuine relationships, and I repeat, genuine relationships with your colleagues. You don't have to be everybody's best friend. You just have to establish a mutual respect where they respect the work that you do and what you deliver, more or less. So that at the moment where you begin to build boundaries and say, hey, I'm sorry, I won't be able to help out with this, the respect is there because they know that if you do it, you will always do a good job with it. On to rule 8. Stay ahead of your role. So there's a general misconception I had early in my career, and that was whenever I got hired for a role, I always believed that I had to wait to first be assigned the responsibility of the role ahead of me before I took them on. And that was some of the lessons that I had to personally learn. In your career, you should always be at least in a minimum one step ahead of your current role. And the reason why is because companies are always looking for people who can step up, right? Some people leave, some people come in, whatever the case may be. You may be given the responsibility to mentor or manage a team that you've never had to do that before. So preparing is always the best way to get ahead of this kind of situations. And how do you prepare? By making sure you are one step ahead of your current role. Always make sure that if you are a junior, curiosity pushes you to learn what the senior is currently doing. And if you're a senior, curiosity ensures that, or you make sure and you ensure that you have an understanding and begin to try to help out with what the staff or architects are working on. And if you're an architect, start looking at the business problems and focusing on how you can kind of meet the business abilities and your technical abilities to add value and hopefully get to the point of a vice president or a VP. So focusing and trying to stay at least, and I emphasize on at least because you can decide to go as far and move at a fairly rapid rate, right? So at a minimum, one step ahead of your current role. That way, you're always prepared to step up if the occasion arises. And you realize that when that time comes and everybody else is not as prepared as you, you would be the natural selection for that role. Rule 9, own your growth. Now, I can't stress this enough. This is a common misconception and mistakes that especially full-time employees make. As contractors, just because of how temporary your role can be sometimes, we typically have an understanding that we have to take ownership and take charge of what we learn, how we learn, and we have to always continuously learn, basically. But for full-time employees, there's always that tendency, especially within larger organizations. I would say my background has quite been within the startup space. So I've always kind of tried to build that into my routine of continuously learning. And to be honest, full disclosure, there have been periods where I have slowed down my learning process and I've paid for it dearly, So I would suggest, and I would not just suggest, I would employ everyone that has the opportunity to watch this video to ensure that your learning process, your self-development process, your growth, you own it, because it's not the company's responsibility. The company's responsibility is to extract value from you, if I'm being honest. It is your responsibility to demonstrate value within your organization and strategically look at the areas in which you can add that value. So how do you do that? You do that by continuously learning. The perfect example is what is happening with AI right now. A lot of people who had white-collar jobs did not expect that their jobs will begin to evolve and their jobs will require them having to learn something new. But if you've been in tech space for a while, you are kind of used to that process where you have to pick up new tools, you have to pick up new programming languages fairly quickly. So for the contractors, even for the full-time employees, I would stress it again. Own your growth, own your development. Do not wait for the company to do or try to point you in the right direction, because a lot of times they would rather just let you go than actually do that. So before I jump to rule 10, thank you for staying up until this point. Those of you who have watched the video up until this point, just want to see special and give you a special shout out to you guys. This, I'm hoping, will be the first of many videos, and I'm hoping to be able to share my experience and also be able to learn from you guys. So once again, if you know someone who's in need of this kind of advice or who's in need of this kind of content, please share and please subscribe. So going on to rule 10. Rule 10 is building your safety net. This is, I would say, the thing that drives or joins everything together, right? Because everything that I've mentioned are things that you can only do as best as you can. But the reality is that economic circumstances, current situations of the way things are will always happen, right? And you as an individual, your first priority is to make sure that you have enough to live off of. So I would suggest, especially for those of us who typically come from countries who I would say are not on the same level as most Western countries, right? When you get that opportunity and you are in a space where you are earning 4 or 5 times more than what you were earning back home, create a safety net for yourself. Now, there are 3 main dimensions basically to the safety net, right? The first one is create a financial safety net, which is money. Save, invest, keep as much as you possibly can to ensure that when things go bad, you have enough to survive for 6 months to a year, right? That way, when you are having conversations and you're on interviews and you're actively looking, you will not negotiate from a point of weakness or desperation, right? You will always be sure that even if I don't get this, I will always have something to survive and feed my family on. Because a lot of times we negotiate from the point of desperation where we start the job and we do not get the satisfaction because we don't feel we're being paid what we are worth, more or less. So I would say always have a financial safety net. Then the next one would be your networking safety net, basically, right? What that basically does, and I'll say it's like the single most important thing in your job hunting career, the people who you refer, the people who you network with outside your company, right? Events, conferences, whatever the case may be, create networks of people who you can help to place in different places, because those are the people who will refer you when something happens, right? The reason is because, especially within the contracting space, IT and the tech world is not as big as a lot of people think it is. So the more people who you can bring to your camp, more people who you guys can mutually benefit from each other, the longer and the easier it is to bounce back when you experience a job loss or where your contract is ended and they decide not to renew, whatever the case may be, right? And finally, the last thing is mentorship. I think this is one thing we cannot stress enough. It is your duty to bring and educate the next generation. And I think in my own way, that is kind of why I also started this YouTube channel, because I felt like for those, obviously for the older, more experienced, 15 years plus in the game, they may not really see what I'm talking about as new. But for those of you who are kind of just coming up and have been in this space and are just getting into this space and you feel lost, you don't feel like you're not 100% sure of what to do, right? You can gain and learn a bit from some of the things I've spoken about. And then for those of us who are seniors, build and mentor people, because the more you can bring people into the system, the more those people, as they rise, can back you and validate the things that you've done for them. So yes, I would say that those 3 things are like the main things that create your safety net. So in conclusion, one thing I want you guys to understand is these rules that I've spoken about came from my personal experience, came from conversations I've had with other tech contractors. There was no book, there was no video, there was no instruction or talk that really taught me these things in my early days. And I felt the need to share this from my own perspective, right? I'm sure people have probably spoken about it in some way, but I felt the need to bring together all my thoughts and all the different things that I felt that I have learned over the course of, I would say, almost a decade in the tech space, and kind of just share it with hopefully people who need it, especially in the current climate we are in with AI and the fear of AI taking over people's jobs. And I'm hoping that will kind of be the content of my next video. We will discuss AI, discuss why people shouldn't necessarily be afraid of AI and how to kind of leverage AI for their own personal career growth. So I want to thank you guys for staying with me up until this point. Once again, if you know anyone who needs this sort of content or is interested in this sort of content, feel free to share and also subscribe. I'm more than happy to have conversations, reply comments. And finally, if any of these points resonates with you, I would love to hear about what resonates with you guys. If you guys have any questions with regards to the tech consulting space, with regards to building and getting into that space, and regards to the kind of content you want to hear or see from me, I will be more than happy to go through and have a conversation with you guys. I go through the comments and I try my best to reply as much as I can on different comments on the channel. And since this is like my first official proper video, I would be definitely listening and looking forward to speaking with you guys and hopefully beginning to build a community where I can kind of share insights and also learn from you guys. So thank you guys once again. I'm Ore and this is Blue Bytera. Enjoy the rest of your day. Take care. Bye.